Hashtag alien girl caught the boy stealing. She never expected to marry him years later. The multicolored lights of Xylar Trading Hub pulsed through the crowded marketplace, illuminating the diverse faces of a dozen alien species haggling over exotic merchandise. Scents of spiced food from across the galaxy mingled with the metallic tang of ship fuel and the unmistakable ozone smell of energy converters. Among the chaos, the subtle but unmistakable presence of Dominion security officers cast long shadows over the otherwise vibrant atmosphere. Their sleek black uniforms and neural stun batons served as constant reminders of who truly controlled this border station. For most inhabitants of Xylar, life continued in the careful dance around Dominion law, prosperous for some, merely survivable for others. Humans, in particular, occupied the lowest rungs of the social ladder in this corner of space, refugees from a planet destroyed in the last expansion of the Dominion's borders. Kale ducked beneath a low-hanging array of holographic advertisements, his thin frame making him nearly invisible as he weaved through the crowded energy market. At 15, he'd mastered the art of being forgettable, a necessary skill for an orphaned human surviving on salvaged tech scraps and occasional theft. His blue eyes, ever watchful, scanned the marketplace from beneath a mop of dirt-brown hair, constantly calculating risks and escape routes. Today's target wasn't food or common medical supplies. For 3 days, he'd been observing the Signian woman's shop with meticulous attention. The modified quantum energy converter she kept beneath her counter was one of the rarest parts in this sector, and the only hope for fixing the medical unit that kept his little sister Ilera alive. The Signian shop stood at the quieter edge of the marketplace, a sleek establishment with a reputation for high-quality tech repairs and components. Unlike the chaotic stalls that dominated the center of the trading hub, her place had actual walls, a real door, and security measures that had taken Kale days to figure out. Lyra, the owner, was unmistakable among the crowd. Pale blue skin with faint crystalline patterns tracing her temples, silver hair pulled back in an intricate braid that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Signians were rare in this sector, their abilities to sense and manipulate energy fields making them both valuable and feared by the Dominion. She appeared to be in her early 20s, though Kale knew little about Signian aging. As he approached, Lyra was engrossed in conversation with a bulky Krovian merchant, discussing the specifications of what looked like a ship navigation system. Perfect timing. Kale slipped into the shop, pausing briefly by the display of standard power cells, pretending to browse while his eyes tracked Lyra's movements. 2 more customers entered, further distracting her. Kale edged closer to the counter, heart hammering against his ribcage. The energy converter was there, just as he'd observed, tucked beneath a false panel that wasn't quite as well hidden as Lyra probably believed. With practiced precision, he waited for her to turn fully away, then slid his hand beneath the counter. His fingers closed around the cool metal of the converter. Victory surged through him as he slipped it into his inner pocket. Just 3 more steps to the door, and I wouldn't do that if I were you. Lyra's cool voice froze in mid-step. Her slender fingers clamped around his wrist with surprising strength before he could bolt. Kale's escape plans evaporated as he found himself staring into eyes the color of deep space. Midnight blue with pinpricks of light like distant stars. "Let me go." Kale struggled, his voice cracking with fear and defiance. "I didn't take anything." "The energy signature of my converter is already resonating from your pocket," Lyra said, her tone surprisingly conversational despite the firmness of her grip. "I could sense it the moment you touched it." Signian tech responds to Signian senses. Panic erupted in Kale's chest. The punishment for theft in Dominion territory ranged from public humiliation to indentured servitude, sometimes even neural conditioning for repeat offenders. He'd seen children his age marched off by Dominion security, returning months later with vacant eyes and compliant smiles. "Please," he whispered, the fight draining from him as he caught sight of 2 Dominion officers entering the marketplace through the main gate. Their scanning visors swept methodically across the crowds. Lyra followed his gaze, her expression shifting subtly. Something, perhaps curiosity or a flash of empathy, crossed her features. "Why this converter?" she asked, her voice lowered. "It's specialized equipment. Not exactly black market valuable." "My sister," Cale blurted, desperation overwhelming caution. "She's sick. The medical unit keeping her stable is failing. I need this specific model to repair the energy flow regulator." The Dominion officers were moving closer, questioning a vendor just 3 stalls away. Cold sweat beaded on Cale's forehead. Lyra's eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that made him wonder if the stories about Signians reading minds were true. Then, in one fluid motion, she pulled him behind the counter and activated a small device on her wrist. A ripple of energy, invisible but palpable, spread around them. "Stay still," she murmured as the Dominion officers approached her shop. "Energy dampening field. As long as you don't move, they won't notice you." Cale held his breath as one of the officers paused at the entrance. "Citizen," the officer addressed Lyra, voice mechanically enhanced by his helmet. "Any disturbances to report?" "None, officer," Lyra replied, her posture relaxed, hands calmly arranging components on her counter. "Just the usual busy trading day." The officer's visor lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, the subtle discrimination against non-human species evident even through the featureless helmet. "Ensure your registration and tax documents are updated by the next cycle. The Dominion is increasing monitoring of all specialized technologies." "Of course, officer." Glory to the Dominion. Lyra's voice revealed nothing of what she might truly feel about the regime. As the security patrol moved on, she deactivated the energy field with a flick of her wrist. Cale stood frozen, confusion written across his face. "Why did you?" "Take it out," Lyra interrupted, gesturing to his pocket. Slowly, Cale hesitated, then withdrew the converter. In the shop's bright light, he could see its complex inner workings through the semi-transparent casing, pulsing with a faint blue energy. "I need it," he said, his voice smaller but still determined. "I'll do anything. Work it off. Whatever you want." Lyra reclaimed the converter, examining it briefly before fixing Cale with that star-filled gaze again. "You said your sister needs this for a medical unit? What's wrong with her?" "Neuromuscular failure from radiation exposure when our sector was annexed," Cale said carefully, the euphemism for the Dominion's violent conquest of the human colony bitter on his tongue. "The unit stabilizes her nervous system until she can grow new pathways. But the converter burned out last week." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the muffled sounds of the marketplace beyond the shop walls. "I won't give you this for free," Lyra finally said, placing the converter on the counter between them. "But I do need help around the shop. Someone quick with their hands and smart enough to learn. The converter costs 3 months' wages. Work for me, and you can earn it." Cale blinked, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help me? I try to steal from you." "I'm not helping you," Lyra corrected, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I'm helping myself to labor I need, and you're helping yourself to legal employment. The fact that it keeps you from a Dominion work camp is incidental." The boy stared at the converter, so close yet still out of reach. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" "You don't," Lyra said simply. "Just as I don't know you won't steal from me again. But I'm willing to take that chance if you are." Cale considered his options, which were, in reality, no options at all. Without the converter, Alera's condition would worsen. With a Dominion record, he'd never find legitimate work. And Lyra had just saved him from exactly that fate. "I'll start now," he said, squaring his thin shoulders. Something that might have been approval flickered in Lyra's eyes. "Good. Start by organizing that pile of circuit boards by compatibility rating." "And Cale," she added, making him start at the use of his name. He was certain he hadn't given it. "Don't mistake necessity for charity. This is business." Cale nodded, suddenly aware that he might have stumbled into something far more complex than a simple job. But as he moved toward the haphazard stack of technology, he felt the weight of failure lifting slightly from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he had a plan that didn't involve stealing or scavenging. And for Alera, that made all the difference. The first days working for Lyra passed in awkward silence and wary observation. Cale arrived early each morning, his eyes constantly tracking the Signian, as if expecting her offer to evaporate. Lyra, for her part, watched him with calculating precision, offering minimal instruction and remaining carefully distant. The shop itself became Cale's education. Customers from across the galaxy brought fascinating technology for repair or trade, components he'd only heard whispered about in the darker corners of Xyler's underbelly. While sorting inventory and cleaning tools, he absorbed everything, mentally cataloging each piece of tech, each repair technique. On the fourth day, Cale arrived to find a malfunctioning atmospheric regulator on his workbench. "Fix it," Lyra said, not looking up from her own delicate work on what appeared to be a quantum encryption device. "I don't know how," Cale admitted, examining the complex device. "Yes, you do," she replied simply. "You've been watching me repair similar units all week. Try." With hesitant hands, Cale began dismantling the regulator. To his surprise, the components made sense to him. The flow logic, the energy pathways. An hour later, he not only fixed the original problem, but identified a secondary issue with the efficiency calibration. When he presented the completed repair to Lyra, her expression remained neutral, but she nodded once, the closest thing to approval he'd received. "You have good hands for this work," she said. "Tomorrow we'll start on more complex systems." That evening, Cale returned to the abandoned maintenance tunnel he and Alara called home, with a small container of nutrient supplements and pain modulators Lyra had given him as an advance on his wages. Alara's thin face lit up at the sight of the medicine. "How's the new job?" she asked, her voice weak but her 9-year-old curiosity undimmed despite her illness. "Strange," Cale answered honestly, adjusting the settings on her medical unit. "But good, I think. The Signian, Lyra, she knows a lot, and she's going to help us get the converter. Is she nice?" Alara persisted, always more concerned with people than technology. Cale considered the question. "Not exactly nice, but fair maybe." As weeks passed, the rhythm of work became more comfortable. Cale's natural aptitude for technology blossomed under Lyra's sparse but precise guidance. The silence between them gradually gave way to professional exchanges, technical discussions, and occasionally brief moments of shared satisfaction over particularly challenging repairs. Lyra never spoke of her past or how a Signian came to run a shop alone on a border station, and Cale never asked. His own history, the Dominion annexation that killed their parents, the years of struggling to keep Alara alive, remained equally unspoken. Then came the day that changed everything. A grizzled Tarovian smuggler barged into the shop, his massive frame filling the doorway. Behind him, 2 human associates with the distinctive scarred facial markings of the station's predominant gang leveled their gazes at Lyra. "Heard you've got Praxian shield modulators," the Tarovian growled. "We need 6. Top price." Lyra's expression remained impassive. "I don't have Praxian tech. It's restricted by Dominion law." The Tarovian's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. "Don't play innocent with me, Signian. Zell told us you've got a secret stock. We'll pay double market." Zell was mistaken, Lyra said, her voice cooling. "I suggest you try the Aurelian sector." The smuggler's mood visibly darkened. "We're not asking anymore." He gestured to his companions, who spread out, blocking the exit. Cale, working in the back room, assessed the situation through the partially open door. 3 armed smugglers, Lyra seemingly unarmed, and Dominion security always happy to arrest everyone involved in any disturbance, especially non-humans. Without conscious thought, he grabbed a neural disruptor he'd been repairing, made a quick adjustment to its output, and stepped into the main shop. "There's a Dominion patrol heading this way," he announced loudly. "Routine sweep. They'll be here in about 30 seconds. The smugglers exchanged nervous glances. The Tarovian leader turned his attention to Cale. "This front working for you now, Signian? Didn't know you hired pets." Before anyone could react, Cale activated the disruptor, sending a focus pulse toward the shop's exterior sensor array. The security alarm triggered instantly, wailing across the marketplace. "That'll bring them running," Kale said with forced confidence. Your choice if you want to be here when they arrive. For a tense moment, the Tarovian seemed ready to risk violence despite the alarm. Then, cursing in his native tongue, he signaled his companions to retreat. This isn't finished, he warned Lyra before disappearing into the rapidly dispersing market crowd. Lyra deactivated the alarm with a quick sequence on her wrist device. She turned to Kale, her star-filled eyes unreadable. Quick thinking, she said after a moment. Though now, we'll have to explain the false alarm to security. Better than explaining why there's a Tarovian bleeding on your floor, Kale replied, setting down the neural disruptor. Besides, the sensor actually was malfunctioning. I just helped it along. The corner of Lyra's mouth twitched in what might almost have been a smile. You modified the disruptor to trigger our own security systems rather than attack them directly. Kale shrugged. Seems smarter than starting a firefight we couldn't win. Smart indeed. Lyra studied him with new intensity. Where did you learn to? Think like that. Surviving on Xylar teaches you to find the least dangerous solution, he answered simply. That evening, instead of sending him home at the usual time, Lyra invited Kale to the small living quarters behind her shop. There, she revealed a hidden compartment containing a meal far better than the standard station rations. Real synthesized protein, fresh hydroponic vegetables, and even a small portion of sweet fermented fruit. You earned this today, she explained, setting the food before him. Quick thinking should be rewarded. As they ate, the rigid formality between them softened slightly. Lyra asked about Alara, showing genuine concern for her condition. Kale, in turn, dared to ask how a Signian had ended up running a tech shop on a border station. Circumstances, Lyra said vaguely, but then added, my people have always had an affinity for energy fields. We can sense them, manipulate them in ways other species find unsettling. The Dominion finds such abilities useful, but also dangerous. Those of us who prefer not to serve as their energy specialists tend to find remote places to practice our trades. Is that why you knew I took the converter right away? Kale asked. You could sense it? Lyra nodded. Everything has an energy signature. Signian technology particularly so. She hesitated, then added, you have an unusual signature yourself. I noticed it the first day. There's a pattern to how you interact with energy fields. It's subtle but distinctive. Kale absorbed this information with surprise. Is that bad? It's unusual, Lyra clarified, especially for a human. It's part of why you have such an intuitive grasp of complex systems. You can't manipulate fields like a Signian, but you can sense the logical flows, I think. It's a valuable skill. Something warm unfurled in Kale's chest at the recognition, not just of his technical abilities, but of something deeper, something he'd always felt but never understood. As he prepared to leave with a portion of food for Alara, Lyra handed him a small package. The first installment toward your energy converter, she said. You're earning it faster than expected. Inside the package, Kale found several high-grade medical supplements and a stabilizer that would extend the life of Alara's failing unit until the full converter could be replaced. Thank you, he said, the words inadequate for the relief he felt. Lyra inclined her head. You're welcome, Kale. It was the first time gratitude had been exchanged between them, a small acknowledgement of something that had begun to feel less like employment and more like partnership. The seasons on a space station were marked not by weather, but by trading cycles, security protocol shifts, and power allocation schedules. For cycles past, then nearly 5 standard years since the day Kale had attempted to steal the energy converter. The boy who had once been a thief had grown into a young man of 19, his frame filled out from regular meals, and his mind sharpened by daily technical challenges. No longer did he slink through Xylar's shadows. Now he walked with the confidence of someone with purpose, someone with skills valued across the station. Lyra's shop had prospered under their combined efforts. Kale's innovative repair techniques complemented Lyra's profound understanding of energy systems, attracting clients from beyond Xylar's immediate sector. The back room had been converted into a specialized workshop where they tackled the most complex projects together. Alara, now 14, had recovered enough to begin an apprenticeship with a station botanist, her gentle nature finding purpose in cultivating the hydroponics gardens that provided fresh produce for Xylar's inhabitants. The energy converter, earned and installed years ago, had done its work perfectly, allowing her nervous system to regenerate with minimal permanent damage. The relationship between Kale and Lyra had evolved into something neither could have predicted. The initial wariness had given way to mutual respect, then to genuine friendship, and more recently, to something neither openly acknowledged, a tension, a gravitational pull between them that manifested in lingering glances, in hands that found reasons to brush against each other during shared work, in conversations that stretched late into the station's artificial night. Lyra, now 26, remained as striking as the day they'd met, though the constant vigilance in her expression had softened when in Kale's presence. For his part, Kale had grown into his lanky frame, his once awkward movements now precise and controlled, his blue eyes still watchful, but capable of warmth that was reserved almost exclusively for Lyra and Alara. But while their personal world had flourished, the larger context of life on Xylar had darkened considerably. Dominion security patrols doubled, then tripled. New scanning checkpoints appeared at major intersections. Throughout the station, taxes increased under the guise of stability maintenance, while rumors spread of dissidents disappearing from their quarters overnight. Non-human species, particularly those with abilities the Dominion considered useful or threatening, faced increasing scrutiny. Papers demanded a security officer, blocking Kale's path as he returned from delivering a repaired navigation unit. Identification and purpose. Kale produced his work permit, hard-won through Lyra's connections and a substantial bribe to a station administrator years ago. Human, the officer noted, scanning the permit with obvious disdain. Working for a Cygnian establishment. Interesting combination. Is there a problem with my documentation? Kale asked, keeping his tone neutral despite the anger simmering beneath. Not yet, the officer replied, returning the permit. But regulations regarding interspecies business partnerships are under review. I suggest staying informed of changes. The implied threat followed Kale back to the shop, where he found Lyra in deep conversation with a tall, silver-haired Cygnian male. The first of her kind Kale had seen on the station besides Lyra herself. They broke off abruptly when Kale entered, the stranger's crystalline patterns glowing faintly with what Kale had learned to recognize as agitation. Kale, Lyra said, her voice carefully controlled. This is Talon, an old colleague from my home system. Talon assessed Kale with eyes similar to Lyra's but harder, more guarded. So this is your human assistant. You trust him? Completely, Lyra answered without hesitation, the immediacy of her response warming Kale, even as the situation raised his internal alarms. Then perhaps he should hear this too, Talon conceded, though reluctance edged his words. The Dominion has initiated Protocol Nexus in the Cygni system. They're harvesting our people, Lyra. Systematic collection of anyone with 5th-tier abilities or higher. 3 containment facilities already filled. Lyra's face drained of color, the blue of her skin fading to a pale, sickly hue. How many taken? Thousands, including your cousin Mira. Kale watched as Lyra's composed exterior cracked slightly, her hand reaching unconsciously for the workbench to steady herself. What's Protocol Nexus? He asked, moving closer to Lyra instinctively. Talon glanced at Lyra, who nodded permission to explain. The Dominion has long been interested in Cygnian energy manipulation abilities, Talon said, his voice lowered despite the shop's security measures. But until now, they've been content with voluntary recruits or occasional acquisitions. Nexus is different. It's a full-scale program to harness Cygnian abilities for weapons development. They're building something big, something that requires multiple energy manipulators working in force synchronization. The rumors about vanishing dissidents, Kale realized. It's not just happening here. It's happening everywhere, Talon confirmed. But the resistance is growing too. The underground has established safe routes for at-risk species. We're moving people out of Dominion space, building a network of safe worlds beyond their reach. Lyra's expression had shifted from shock to resolve. What do you need from me, Talon? Your skills, your knowledge of Xyler's security systems. And he hesitated, glancing at the shop's specialized equipment, access to your energy conversion technology. We need to shield our transports from Dominion detection. The request hung in the air, its implications clear. Helping the resistance meant crossing a line from which there would be no return. Kale found himself speaking before he'd fully processed his own thoughts. Whatever you need from the shop, I can help modify it for transport shielding. I've been working on adaptive resonance fields that might confuse their scanning arrays. Both Signians turned to him with surprise. This isn't your fight, Kale, Lyra said softly. The Dominion targets Signians specifically. You can maintain your position here, keep your safety. They targeted humans too. Kale reminded her, the memories of his parents and his destroyed home world still painful. They just finished with us first. And besides, he added, his voice dropping, you know it's not that simple. Something unspoken passed between them. The years of partnership, the gradually deepening bond, the shared understanding that had long ago transcended mere business. The Dominion would see your involvement as species betrayal, Talon warned. The punishment would be severe. I stopped caring about Dominion approval the day they decided my planet was expendable, Kale replied evenly. If Lyra's helping, I'm helping. Lyra's expression softened momentarily, vulnerability flickering across her features before she composed herself again. We'll need to be careful, she said to Talon. Security has tightened significantly, but we can modify 6 or 7 converters to create the shielding you need. It will take a few days to avoid detection. Talon nodded. I'll return in 3 cycles. The next transport leaves then. And Lyra, thank you. His gaze shifted to Kale. Both of you. After he departed, silence filled the shop, heavy with the weight of their commitment. You didn't have to do that, Lyra finally said, moving to lock the shop's entrance and activate additional security measures. This puts you at tremendous risk. I know, Kale acknowledged, beginning to gather the components they would need. But so are you. And I. He paused, suddenly uncertain how to articulate the depth of what he felt, what had been building between them for years. Lyra turned to him, something new in her star-filled eyes. And you what, Kale? And I wouldn't let you face that alone, he finished softly. Not after everything. She moved closer, the crystalline patterns at her temples glowing with a warm light he'd never seen before. Everything. You saved me, Kale said simply. Not just from Dominion security that day. From the life I would have had without you. Without this. He gestured to the shop, to the world they'd built together. I would have remained a thief, or worse. Ilera might have died. Instead, I found purpose, skills, a place to belong. You earned all of that yourself, Lyra countered, now standing close enough that he could see the subtle shifts of light beneath her skin. Because you gave me the chance, Kale insisted. His hand reached up tentatively, fingertips hovering near the crystalline patterns at her temple. Because you saw something in me worth saving. For years, they had maintained careful boundaries, professional distance despite the growing attraction. But in this moment, with the decision to actively resist the Dominion made, those careful walls seemed suddenly irrelevant. Lyra leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly as his fingers made contact with the crystalline patterns. A soft glow emanated from the point of contact, a gentle resonance that Kale could feel humming through his own body. I've wanted to do that for a long time, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I know, she replied, opening her eyes to meet his. I could sense your energy signature change whenever you looked at me. It's distinctive. Is that a good thing? Kale asked with the ghost of a smile, echoing their conversation from years before. It's a very good thing, Lyra confirmed, and then she was closing the distance between them, her lips finding in a kiss that seemed to accelerate all the slow-building feelings of the past 5 years into a single, perfect moment of connection. When they separated, Kale rested his forehead against hers, feeling a sense of rightness, of completion. We'll need to be careful, he said, reluctantly returning to practical concerns. Security will be watching known non-humans more closely now. Yes, Lyra agreed, though she made no move to increase the distance between them. But we have 3 days to prepare. And I think, she added, a rare smile illuminating her features, that we've proven ourselves quite capable when working together. They spent the next 2 days in careful preparation, modifying energy converters to generate the shielding fields the resistance transports would need. By night, they worked on the technical aspects of their contribution. By day, they maintained the appearance of normal business operations while quietly gathering supplies they would need if a quick departure became necessary. On the evening before Talon's scheduled return, they worked late into the night on the final adjustments to the shielding technology. The shop was quiet, the market beyond shut down for the station's night cycle. Only the soft hum of equipment and the occasional murmur of technical observations passed between them. I think that's the last one, Cale said, setting down his tools and stretching his tired muscles. 7 converters, each capable of generating a phase-shifted energy field that should mask life signs and propulsion signatures from standard Dominion scanners. Lyra nodded, running her fingers over the finished devices, her touch leaving faint, illuminated trails as her Signian abilities interacted with the technology. The resonance is clean. Better than I hoped, actually. Your modifications to the output array are elegant. High praise from you. Cale smiled, moving to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, watching as she continued to fine-tune the devices. Well-deserved, she replied, leaning back against him. For a moment, they simply existed together in the peaceful stillness, a rare commodity in their increasingly dangerous lives. Come with me, Lyra said suddenly, taking his hand and guiding him toward her private quarters beyond the workshop. Her room was sparsely decorated but distinctly Signian. Crystalline structures caught and refracted light in complex patterns across the walls, and a small meditation pool in the corner glowed with bioluminescent life forms from her homeworld. She led him to a concealed panel in the wall, activating it with a precise energy pattern from her fingertips. Inside the hidden compartment lay a collection of items Cale had never seen. Documents with unfamiliar insignia, what appeared to be star charts of regions beyond Dominion space, and a small crystalline cube that pulsed with internal light. My contingency plan, Lyra explained, lifting the cube carefully. I've had this since I first settled on Xylar. Coordinates to safe worlds, contact protocol for resistance cells, and this, she held up the cube, a family heirloom. It contains the energy signatures of my ancestors, going back 17 generations. It's the closest thing Signians have to a soul repository. Cale understood the significance of what she was showing him. Not just practical escape plans, but her most personal possession, her cultural heritage. Why are you showing me this now? He asked softly. Lyra placed the cube in his palm, closing his fingers around it. To his surprise, it warmed in his hand, the light within pulsing in a rhythm that somehow matched his heartbeat. Because it recognizes you, she said, wonder in her voice. It's attuned itself to your energy signature. That's unprecedented. These cubes typically only respond to Signian patterns. Cale stared at the cube, feeling a strange connection to the ancient technology. What does it mean? It means, Lyra said, meeting his eyes with newfound certainty, that whatever happens tomorrow or in the days to come, we are connected in ways that transcend ordinary bonds. She took a deep breath. I love you, Cale. I think I have for years, but I was afraid to acknowledge it, afraid of what it might mean for both of us in a world where the Dominion punishes those who cross species boundaries. The declaration, so long unspoken between them, filled Cale with a joy that momentarily overshadowed the dangers ahead. I love you too. I think I started falling for you the day you caught me stealing and offered me a job instead of turning me in. Lyra laughed softly, the sound like crystal chimes. Not the most conventional beginning to a love story. We were never going to have a conventional story, Cale replied, setting the cube carefully aside before drawing her into his arms. A human thief and a Signian tech genius, resisting the Dominion together? I'm pretty sure that breaks every rule in their precious order. Good, Lyra whispered against his lips. Some rules deserve to be broken. The moment of connection that followed, tender, passionate, and charged with the energy of both their feelings and Lyra's Signian nature, felt like a declaration of defiance against the Dominion's cold order, a claim that connection and love could exist even in the shadow of oppression. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, planning their contribution to tomorrow's resistance operation, neither could have anticipated how dramatically their lives would change in the next 24 hours. The day of Talon's return dawned with an artificial brightness typical of space stations. Kale and Lyra opened the shop as usual, the modified converters hidden beneath a false panel in the workshop floor. They'd agreed that Kale would make the handoff to Talon while Lyra conducted business as usual, drawing less attention than if two Signians were seen meeting. By midday, the marketplace had reached its typical bustling capacity. Kale repaired a customer's datapad, while keeping a watchful eye on the station's main thoroughfare. Lyra was in the back, finalizing a complex repair job for a merchant captain. The first sign of trouble came not as a dramatic alarm or announcement, but as a subtle shift in the marketplace's energy. Conversations quieted. Vendors began closing shop with unusual haste. Then Kale saw them, a full squad of Dominion security officers in tactical gear, methodically moving through the market, checking identifications and scanning faces. Lyra, he called softly but urgently toward the workshop. We have a situation. She appeared in the doorway, instantly assessing the danger with a glance. Sweep patrol. Unusual for this time of cycle. They're not just checking papers, Kale noted, watching as an officer detained a Merluvian trader. They're using advanced bioscanners, looking for something specific. A customer entered the shop, a nondescript human in simple clothes. Kale recognized him immediately despite never having seen him before. The too casual posture, the eyes that systematically scanned every corner of the shop. An undercover agent. Can I help you? Kale asked, positioning himself subtly between the man and the workshop where Lyra stood. Just browsing, the man replied, moving deeper into the shop. I hear you might have specialty converters. High-capacity models. The trap was obvious. Kale maintained his professional smile. We carry standard Dominion-approved technology only. Perhaps the orbital exchange on level 3 would have what you're looking for. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. I was specifically directed to this shop by a mutual acquaintance. Silver-haired fellow. Kale's blood ran cold. Either Talon had been compromised, or this was an exceptionally well-informed trap. I'm afraid I don't, he began, but was interrupted by the shop security alert pulsing softly. The outer market security checkpoint had been activated. They were surrounded. Kale, Lyra said calmly from behind him, having assessed the situation. Would you check our inventory in the back? I believe we might have one specialty converter left after all. The code was clear. Kale nodded and backed toward the workshop as Lyra approached the undercover agent with professional courtesy. The moment he was out of sight, he activated their emergency protocol, grabbing the hidden converters and dropping them into a shielded bag. Through the partially open door, he heard Lyra's voice, steady and controlled. My assistant is checking our secure storage. While we wait, perhaps you could show me your license for purchasing restricted technology. The diversionary tactic wouldn't last long. Kale moved swiftly to the hidden panel in Lyra's quarters, retrieving the crystalline cube and emergency documents. If they had to run, they'd need both. When he returned to the main shop, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Two uniformed Dominion officers now flanked the undercover agent. Lyra stood with her back to the counter, her posture deceivingly relaxed, but Kale could see the faint glow of her temple patterns. She was preparing to use her abilities. Lyra of Signy, one officer announced formally. By authority of Dominion Security Protocol 557, you are ordered to surrender for processing and relocation. Signian abilities have been requisitioned for Dominion's scientific advancement. And what about my human assistant? Lyra asked coolly, her eyes flicking briefly to Kale. Humans assisting in Signian enterprises will be detained for questioning regarding potential subversive activities, the officer stated. The undercover agent glanced at the bag in Kale's hand, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What's in the bag, boy?" Kale's mind raced through their options, each worse than the last. They couldn't fight their way out, not against armed Dominion forces. The escape route they'd planned for Talon's visit was likely compromised. Then he saw it, the small environmental control panel near the shop entrance. With a slight adjustment, he could trigger. "Just some personal effects," Kale answered, slowly moving as if to set the bag down, positioning himself closer to the control panel. He caught Lyra's eye and blinked twice, their signal for imminent action. "Open it," the agent demanded, hand moving to his concealed weapon. Instead, Kale lunged for the environmental panel, smashing his elbow into the emergency override. Alarms blared as the shop's atmospheric containment protocols engaged, standard procedure for potential toxic leaks. Heavy shutters began descending over the entrance, and the automated system announced, "Containment breach detected. Emergency lockdown initiated." In the moment of confusion, Lyra acted. Her hands moved in precise gestures, crystalline patterns flaring with brilliant light as she manipulated the energy fields around them. The lighting systems overloaded in a cascade of sparks, plunging the shop into darkness broken only by emergency lights and the glow of Lyra's abilities. "Now!" she shouted, throwing a concentrated energy pulse that knocked the officers backward. Kale was already moving, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the hidden maintenance access in the workshop floor. Their true emergency exit, concealed beneath equipment and shielded from standard scans. They dropped through the narrow opening just as blaster fire scorched the wall where they had stood. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and dark, designed for repair drones rather than humanoids. They crawled rapidly, hearing the commotion of pursuit above. "They were waiting for us," Kale gasped as they emerged into a larger junction. "How did they know?" "The entire sector must be compromised," Lyra replied, her breathing labored, the glow of her temple patterns providing faint illumination. "We need to reach Alara before they do." "This way," Kale urged, leading them through the maze of maintenance tunnels he'd mapped during his years as a scavenger. "The hydroponics lab is closest through here." They emerged into the humid warmth of Xyler's main hydroponics garden, startling a group of workers tending the protein vats. Alara looked up from her workstation, her eyes widening at their disheveled appearance. "What's happened?" she asked, immediately setting aside her cultivation tools. "No time," Kale said, embracing his sister briefly. "Dominion security is after us. We have to leave Xyler. Now." To her credit, Alara asked no further questions, simply nodding and retrieving a small pack from beneath her workstation. "I've had this ready since you first told me about helping the Resistance," she explained, seeing their surprise. "I'm not as naive as you think." Alarms began blaring throughout the station, the automated announcement system declaring, "Attention, all citizens. Dominion security lockdown in effect. Report any sightings of fugitive entities immediately. Harboring fugitives constitutes treason against the Dominion." "They're sealing the docking bays," Lyra realized, her expression grim. "If we can't reach a ship." "I know someone," Alara interrupted, surprising both of them. "The botanist I've been apprenticed to, Dr. Varen. He has a private research vessel with clearance to depart for specimen collection. He's mentioned his disapproval of the Dominion's policies before." Kale and Lyra exchanged a glance. It was their only option. "Lead the way," Kale told his sister. They moved through the hydroponic section to a research annex, where an elderly Telosian with scale-like skin was hurriedly gathering specimens into containment units. "Dr. Varen," Alara called softly, "I need your help." The botanist looked up, taking in the three fugitives with a quick, assessing gaze. "The Dominion is searching for a Signian and her human associates," he stated matter-of-factly. "I presume that would be you." "Yes," Lyra admitted. "And we have these." She indicated the bag of modified converters. "They're meant for the Resistance. Technology that can shield ships from Dominion detection." Dr. Varen's multifaceted eyes blinked rapidly, a Telosian sign of intense thought. "My research vessel departs in 30 minutes for the outer asteroid belt. Specimen gathering." He gestured to the storage containers. These containers are shielded to preserve the biological integrity of sensitive samples. Understanding dawned on Kale's face. Large enough to hold a person? 3. If they don't mind close quarters, the botanist confirmed. I have never considered myself a political being, but I have lived long enough to see what becomes of civilizations that devour their constituent parts. The Dominion's treatment of specialized species like the Signians is botanically unsound. An ecosystem that consumes its most unique elements will ultimately collapse. Thank you, Elara said, embracing her mentor. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Varen cautioned. We still need to reach the research dock, and you'll need to remain absolutely silent in the containers. The atmospheric mix will sustain you, but it won't be comfortable. As they prepared the containers, Kale pulled Lyra aside, pressing the bag of converters into her hands. If we're separated, you need to keep these safe. They're more important than any of us. No, Lida countered firmly. Nothing is more important than staying together now. We'll deliver these to the Resistance, but we do it together or not at all. Before Kale could respond, the lab door slid open. They froze, expecting Dominion forces, but instead, Talon stood there, breathless and injured, an energy burn scarring one side of his face. The network is compromised, he gasped. Dominion has informants everywhere. The rendezvous point is lost. We have the converters, Lyra told him urgently, and a potential way off the station. Talon shook his head grimly. I can't leave yet. Others are still hiding throughout Xylar. I need to warn them, coordinate alternative extraction. His eyes fell on the specialized containers. But you need to get those converters to the secondary contact on Meridian Outpost. They're critical for the next phase. We can't just leave you, Kale protested. You must, Talon insisted. Especially you, Lyra. Your abilities mark you as a prime target for Protocol Nexus. The Dominion won't just detain you, they'll drain you. A distant explosion rocked the station, the lights flickering momentarily. That's our diversion team, Talon explained, creating chaos near the main docks to draw security away from the research base. You need to move now. Dr. Varen sealed Elara into the first container, adjusting the environmental controls carefully. As he prepared the second container for Lyra, Kale pulled Talon aside. They're the maintenance tunnel network, he explained rapidly, sketching a rough map on a scrap of laboratory film. Access point behind the protein cultivation tank. It leads to most major sections of the station. My old hiding spot is here, he marked a junction. Reinforced and shielded. It will hide at least 5 people from standard scans. Talon accepted the map with a nod of gratitude. Take care of her, he said, glancing at Lyra. She's one of our best. She's more than that to me, Kale replied quietly. The Signian's expression softened with understanding. Then we fight not just for freedom, but for the right to love beyond the boundaries they impose on us. Go, find a Resistance. We will meet again in better times. As Dr. Varen helped Lyra into her container, she reached for Kale, pulling him close for one desperate kiss. No matter what happens, she whispered, what we've found together is worth fighting for. Kale nodded, too full of emotion to speak as he sealed her container carefully, watching her face through the small observation port until Dr. Varen activated the stasis field that would make the containers appear to contain only botanical specimens. As he climbed into his own container, Kale caught one last glimpse of Talon slipping back into the corridor, heading deeper into the station to warn the others. The container sealed with a hiss of pressurized air, and darkness enveloped him as the stasis field activated. The next hours passed in uncomfortable confinement, punctuated by the muffled sounds of security checkpoints and the vibration of the research vessel departing Xylar Station. Kale focused on thoughts of Lyra, of the future they might build together if they survived, a future where Signians and humans could live and love without the Dominion's oppressive shadow. When the containers finally opened, they found themselves in the cargo hold of Dr. Varen's small research vessel, deep in the asteroid belt beyond Xylar's immediate security grid. We've cleared the patrol zone, the Telosian informed them as they emerged, stiff and disoriented. But we're not safe yet. Dominion pursuit ships will be searching all vessels departing the sector. Lyra immediately moved to unpack the converters. Where can we install these? If we can create a masking field around the ship, we might avoid detection long enough to reach Meridian Outpost. Engineering access is through there. Dr. Varen indicated a small hatch. But I know little about energy manipulation technology. That's why you have us, Kale said, already gathering tools from a nearby equipment locker. Lyra designs, I implement, and we all survive to fight another day. Working in the cramped engineering compartment, they rapidly installed 3 of the converters into the ship's power grid, modifying the configuration to generate an overlapping field that would mask their energy signature from Dominion scanners. It's working, Lyra confirmed, her Signian senses detecting the subtle shift in the energy field surrounding the vessel. We're essentially invisible to standard detection methods. For 3 tense days, they navigated the treacherous path to Meridian Outpost, a supposedly independent mining colony that secretly served as a waypoint for those fleeing Dominion control. Dr. Varen's knowledge of remote asteroid fields and neglected transit routes proved invaluable, allowing them to avoid main shipping lanes where Dominion presence would be strongest. When they finally docked at Meridian's auxiliary port, they were met by Resistance operatives who had been alerted to watch for any vessel exhibiting the unique energy signature of their modified converters. Welcome to free space. Their contact greeted them, a scarred Trinaxian whose species had been among the first to suffer under Dominion expansion. We've been hoping someone would deliver these converters. They're the key to our new transport network. The outpost itself was a study in controlled chaos. Refugees from dozens of worlds living alongside miners and traders, all united by their rejection of Dominion authority. Hidden within the legitimate mining operation were training facilities, communication centers, and planning rooms where the Resistance coordinated their growing movement. For the first time since fleeing Xylar, Kale, Lyra, and Alara could breathe without the immediate fear of capture. They were given small but private quarters within the residential section of the outpost, their skills immediately recognized as valuable assets to the Resistance effort. In the weeks that followed, they fell into new roles. Lyra training other energy-sensitive species in detecting and countering Dominion technology, Kale adapting his repair expertise to outfitting Resistance vessels, and Alara applying her botanical knowledge to the outpost's critical food production efforts. But amid the constant work and planning, the fear for those left behind remained. News from Xylar was sparse and grim. The Dominion had instituted a complete lockdown of the station, with hundreds detained for questioning and dozens of suspected Resistance sympathizers publicly processed for rehabilitation. Of Talon and the others, there was no word. 2 months after their arrival at Meridian, Kale found Lyra alone in their quarters, holding the crystalline cube that contained her ancestral energy. Signatures. Its light pulsed weakly, its once brilliant glow diminished. It's responding to my worry, she explained as he sat beside her. Reflecting what I feel. So many of our people are being taken, their abilities harvested. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, running instead of staying to fight. Kale covered her hands with his own, the cube warming slightly at his touch. We're fighting in a different way. The converters you designed have already helped dozens of ships escape Dominion space. Your training program is giving others the tools to resist energy detection. But is it enough? Lyra asked, the weight of responsibility heavy in her voice. It has to be, Kale replied softly, because the alternative is surrender, and neither of us is built for that. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing something he'd been working on in secret during his few spare moments. It was a ring, crafted from a piece of Xylar Station metal he'd kept as a reminder, inset with a tiny fragment of Signian crystal that Lyra had once given him for a repair project. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment, he admitted. But I'm realizing there might never be a perfect time in the middle of a Resistance movement. So instead, I'm choosing now. Lyra's eyes widened as she recognized what he was offering. I know we're from different worlds, Kale continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. different species with different lifespans and abilities. I know the Dominion would consider our union a violation of their precious order, and I know we might not survive this conflict. He took her hand, the blue of her skin contrasting with his sun-darkened human tone. But I also know that finding you, or rather, you catching me, was the best thing that ever happened to me. What started with a thief and a shopkeeper has become something neither of us could have imagined. I love you, Lyra of Signy, and if you'll have me, I want to spend whatever future we can claim together. The crystalline patterns at Lyra's temples glowed with an intensity Kale had never seen before, illuminating her face as tears gathered in her star-filled eyes. In my culture, she said softly, we believe that certain energy signatures are destined to harmonize across time and space. That some connections transcend the physical limitations of species or origin. She took the ring from his palm, examining the seamless blend of human craftsmanship and Signian crystal. I felt it the first time I sensed your energy pattern, something unique, something that resonated with my own in ways I couldn't explain. She slipped the ring onto her finger, where it settled perfectly. Yes, Kale. In this resistance and beyond, my answer is yes. The simple, profound moment of commitment amid the uncertainty of war became a beacon of hope. Not just for them, but for others in the resistance who witnessed their union in a small ceremony weeks later. A human and a Signian, pledging themselves to each other in defiance of the Dominion's segregationist policies, became a powerful symbol of the future they were all fighting for. The ceremony itself blended elements of both their traditions, a human exchange of vows and a Signian energy bond ritual, where their distinct patterns were allowed to mingle and harmonize in a visible display that left even non-sensitive species in awe of its beauty. Alara, appointed ceremonial witness, spoke words that resonated beyond the small gathering. From the darkest beginnings come the brightest lights. What started with a thief and his target has become a beacon for all of us who believe that connections between people, between species, between worlds, are more powerful than any empire built on division. As husband and wife, Kale and Lyra continued their work with the Resistance, their complementary skills and deep connection making them particularly effective operatives. When news finally came of successful extractions from Xylar, including Talon and several other Signians who had gone into deep hiding, their joy was amplified by the growing sense that the Resistance was gaining real momentum across multiple sectors. 1 year after their escape from Xylar, they stood together on observation deck of Meridian Outpost, watching as a fleet of Resistance ships prepared for a major operation to liberate a Dominion processing facility where captured Signians and other energy-sensitive species were being held. Did you ever imagine, when you caught me trying to steal that converter, that we'd end up here? Kale asked, his arm around Lyra's waist as they gazed at the stars. She leaned into him, the ring on her finger catching the light. Life rarely gives us what we expect, she replied, echoing words he had spoken once. Sometimes it gives us something better. Kale smiled, remembering the desperate boy he'd been and the extraordinary journey that had led him to this moment. A thief and a shopkeeper turned Resistance fighters turned husband and wife. The Dominion would say it's disorder. Then disorder is beautiful, Lyra declared, turning to face him fully, the starlight reflecting in her eyes. And worth fighting for. Their kiss, witnessed only by distant stars and passing comets, sealed a union that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances. A human boy caught stealing by an alien girl who never expected, years later, to call him husband. Their story, like the Resistance itself, was proof that even in the darkest corners of the Dominion's reach, unexpected connections could flourish, bringing light to the depths of space and hope to the future of all free peoples.